In the heart of Middle-earth, during the Second Age, the great craft of ring-making emerged, heralding the beginning of a legend that would shape the fate of all who lived in that age. It was in the distant realm of Eregion that a divine craftsman, known only as Anatar, arrived. Claiming to be a messenger from the Valar, he brought with him knowledge of an art so powerful that its consequences would echo through the ages. The Elves, always eager for mastery over the forge, received Anatar's teachings and began to shape the rings of power in the heart of their secret workshops. With every stroke of the hammer upon the anvil, a new creation took form, each ring imbued with a magic that would forever alter the destiny of its bearer. Yet not all were destined to wear such potent symbols of authority. While the great rings glittered with grandeur and majesty, lesser rings were crafted first, unpolished experiments in a craft that was still in its infancy. For the Elves, these lesser rings were mere trifles, prototypes that barely skimmed the surface of their potential. However, they were far from harmless, as even the smallest of these rings held a potent magic capable of ensnaring the souls of those who dared to wear them. The secrets of these lesser rings remain shrouded in mystery. Their exact number and the specific enchantments they bore have long been lost to time, yet whispers in the legendarium hint at their true nature. The chief power of all the rings of power was the ability to preserve life, preserve beauty, preserve what one held dear. This is the motif of decay and preservation that runs throughout Tolkien's work, and it is one that touches the lesser rings as well. For instance, in The Hobbit, Bilbo's encounter with the One Ring offers an intriguing glimpse into the powers of invisibility. It was said that magic rings capable of rendering their bearers invisible were common in the old tales. Could these tales be based on the lesser rings? Perhaps, for when Bilbo stumbled upon the ring, he found himself unseen by Gollum, even though they were mere yards apart. Could the lesser rings have also granted this peculiar gift of invisibility? Though the magic of these rings was not fully understood, the preservation of life was a theme shared by all rings. Gollum and Bilbo, both touched by the One Ring, experienced unnaturally prolonged lives, an effect that hints at the broader enchantment woven into the lesser rings. What other abilities did these seemingly unassuming rings possess? Perhaps more secrets lie hidden within their simple forms, treasures yet to be fully unearthed, and powers waiting to be uncovered by those brave or foolish enough to seek them. As the Elves refined their craft under the tutelage of Anatar, the creation of the Great Rings became the central focus of their work. These rings, unlike their lesser counterparts, were far more than simple trinkets. They were potent artifacts of immense power, each one designed to fulfill a specific purpose and to influence the hearts of those who would wear them. Their creation marked a pivotal moment in the history of Middle-earth, a moment when the fates of elves, men, and dwarves would forever be intertwined with the magic of these rings. The great rings were divided into 3 groups, each carefully crafted to reflect the desires and aspirations of the races they were intended for. 3 rings were made for the Elven kings, the mightiest of their kind, who ruled beneath the sky. These rings, though powerful, were not created with domination in mind. Rather, they were imbued with the elven values of preservation, healing, and understanding. They were gifts meant to protect and nurture rather than to conquer or subjugate. Yet even these rings were not free from the shadow of Sauron's will, for the power within them was forever tainted by the One Ring, which Sauron himself forged in secret. 7 rings were made for the Dwarven lords, the stalwart and resilient craftsmen of Middle-earth. These rings, like the elven ones, were meant to amplify the strength and endurance of the dwarves, enhancing their mastery over stone and metal. However, the effects of these rings were far less subtle. While the elves used their rings to heal and preserve, the dwarven rings awakened a more dangerous desire: greed. The rings fueled the dwarves' obsession with wealth, driving them to hoard treasures beyond measure. This insatiable lust for gold and riches would ultimately become their undoing, as it drew the eye of dragons and led to the fall of great kingdoms like Erebor and Moria. But it was the 9 rings given to men that carried the most tragic and far-reaching consequences. For men whose lives were brief and fragile, the rings of power promised something irresistible: immortality. The rings whispered to the hearts of men, promising them dominion over the world, eternal life, and unchallenged power. It was the ultimate temptation, the chance to conquer death itself. Yet, as with all things in Middle-earth, the price of such power was steep, for the very nature of the rings was to corrupt and twist the hearts of those who wore them. Over time, the gifts of the rings revealed their darker sides. For the men who wore them, the rings became a source of power, yes, but also of decay. The more they used them, the more they became ensnared in their influence. The rings did not bestow true immortality. Instead, they slowly stretched the lives of their bearers, drawing them closer to the realm of shadows and wraiths. The once mighty kings of men, who dreamed of ruling forever, found themselves fading into mere phantoms, consumed by the power they sought to wield. The greatest example of this was the fall of the 9 mortal kings who were gifted with these rings. Though their reigns began with glory, they were gradually consumed by their desire for more power, more control, and ultimately, more life. The rings granted them a terrifying form of immortality, but it was not a life of substance. Instead, it was a half-life, a shadow of their former selves, until they became the ring wraiths, the Nazgul servants of the Dark Lord Sauron. The rings of power, though they appeared as wondrous gifts, were in fact chains, binding their wearers to Sauron's will. The elves, with their keen understanding of magic, were the first to recognize the danger, and though they were able to resist Sauron's direct influence, they could not entirely escape the grip of the rings. They too were bound to the power of the One Ring, and though they remained free of Sauron's immediate control, they were still vulnerable to his overarching influence. This was the curse of the rings, to hold power without the ability to truly control it. In this way, the great rings were not merely tools of power. They were symbols of Sauron's ability to manipulate and dominate, bending even the mightiest of beings to his will. The tale of the rings is one of seduction and ruin, a stark reminder that true power cannot be gained through domination, but must be earned through wisdom, humility, and sacrifice. While the rings given to men and dwarves had their destructive effects, the 3 elven rings stood apart as both a source of immense power and a beacon of resistance against Sauron's malevolent influence. Created in secret by the elven smith Celebrimbor, these rings were fashioned with the greatest care and the noblest intentions. Unlike the other rings of power, the elven rings were not meant to dominate, but to preserve, to protect the beauty and sanctity of Middle-earth from the encroaching shadow of Sauron. And yet, even the elves were not immune to the seductions of the rings. The 3 elven rings, Vilya, Nenya, and Narya, were of unparalleled strength. Each bore a unique enchantment, crafted to reflect the desires and strengths of their respective bearers. Vilya, the Ring of Air, was the most potent, a sapphire set in a gold band. It was held by Elrond, Lord of Rivendell, and was said to possess the power to heal and protect, to shield against decay and corruption. In Elrond's hands, it became a symbol of his unwavering commitment to peace and his desire to preserve the ancient beauty of his realm. Through the magic of Vilya, Rivendell flourished, and the healing arts of Elrond became renowned throughout Middle-earth. Nenya, the Ring of Water, was forged from mithril and set with a white stone of adamant. Galadriel, the Lady of Lothlorien, wore this ring, and its power mirrored her own: strength, beauty, and resilience. Nenya was a ring of preservation, capable of preserving the land of Lothlorien in a state of unspoiled perfection. Under its influence, Lothlorien became a place of tranquility and beauty, untouched by the decay and darkness that ravaged the rest of Middle-earth. However, the ring's power also came at a cost, for it heightened Galadriel's yearning for the undying lands. Her desire to leave Middle-earth for the west was magnified by the magic of Nenya, and thus, even as she preserved her realm, she was drawn toward the distant shores of Valinor. The third ring, Naraya, the Ring of Fire, was fashioned from a red stone and carried by Gandalf, the wizard. Naraya was a gift from Círdan the shipwright, who recognized Gandalf's potential and wisdom. The power of Naraya lay in its ability to inspire and rekindle the spirits of those who bore it. It was a ring of courage, a ring that could stir the hearts of the weary and the downtrodden. In Gandalf's hands, it became a symbol of hope and perseverance, fueling the resistance against Sauron's growing power. Through Naraya, Gandalf was able to rouse the Rohirrim in their darkest hour, and to stand firm against the forces of evil that threatened to engulf Middle-earth. Unlike the rings of men and dwarves, the Elven Rings were shielded from the direct influence of Sauron's will, but they were not immune to the One Ring's corrupting force. Although the elves who wielded them did so with wisdom and caution, they were still, in a sense, bound to the Master Ring. Sauron, in his lust for power, coveted the Elven Rings above all others. His ultimate goal was not merely to dominate Middle-earth, but to subjugate the elves and control their immense magical abilities. However, the elves, keenly aware of the danger, did not fall under Sauron's sway, as the men had. Instead, they hid their rings from his gaze, cloaking them in secrecy and taking great care to keep them from falling into the wrong hands. Yet, despite their best efforts, the elves were not immune to the passage of time. The rings, powerful as they were, could not prevent the inevitable decay of the world around them. The elves, though immortal, were fated to eventually depart from Middle-earth, leaving behind their rings and their realms to fade into memory. The tragic irony of the Elven Rings is that despite their best efforts to preserve and protect, they were ultimately powerless to stop the changing tides of history. In the end, the Elven Rings served as a reminder of the delicate balance between power and responsibility. They were not tools of conquest, but instruments of preservation, meant to protect and shield, not to dominate. Yet even these rings, forged with the purest intentions, were not immune to the corruption that lingered in the heart of Middle-earth. And though the elves used them with wisdom and care, they too were caught in the web of fate woven by Sauron's One Ring. At the heart of all the rings of power lies the One Ring, the greatest and most terrifying of them all. Born in secret within the fiery depths of Mount Doom, the One Ring was forged by Sauron himself, and it embodied the Dark Lord's desire for absolute control over all of Middle-earth. Unlike the other rings, which were crafted with the intent to amplify the strengths and desires of their bearers, the One Ring was created for one purpose only: to rule over the others. to bend their will to Sauron's and to bring all living beings under his dominion. The One Ring was unadorned, simple in form, a band of gold, round and plain. Yet within its unassuming shape lay a power so vast and malignant that it would come to define the fate of the entire world. Sauron poured his own dark essence into the ring, binding it to his own will, and as a result, it became an extension of his very being. The One Ring, through its connection to Sauron, held dominion over the other rings of power, and through them, it would enslave the hearts and minds of those who wore them. Sauron's first attempt at domination was thwarted, but not before he brought untold destruction to Middle-earth. The last alliance of Elves and Men, led by Gil-galad and Elendil, battled the Dark Lord in a final confrontation on the slopes of Mount Doom. Though Sauron was defeated and cast down, his ring was not destroyed. It was taken by Isildur, who claimed it as his own, though he did not understand the full extent of its power. Isildur's weakness, his pride, and desire to keep the ring led to his downfall. The ring betrayed him, slipping from his finger during an ambush by orcs, and with it, Sauron's dominion over the world was not just preserved, it was only delayed. The ring would remain lost for many centuries until it was found by Gollum, the creature whose very name became synonymous with obsession and madness. Gollum's long possession of the ring only deepened its grip on him, twisting his mind and heart until he became a shadow of his former self. It was through Gollum that the ring would be brought back into the world, and from there its fate would become irrevocably intertwined with that of Frodo Baggins, a simple hobbit from the Shire. Frodo, the unlikely ring-bearer, was tasked with the impossible, to destroy the One Ring and end Sauron's reign forever. But even as Frodo undertook this perilous journey, the ring's power continued to grow. It whispered to him, tempting him with promises of glory, power, and immortality. It called to his deepest desires, pulling him closer to the dark heart of Middle-earth. The One Ring did not seek to rule by force alone. It sought to subjugate the very will of its bearer, to twist their thoughts and desires until they were no longer their own. As Frodo and his companions journeyed toward Mount Doom, they encountered the full range of the ring's power. The ring's influence over the minds of those around Frodo became ever more evident. Boromir, a proud and noble man, was driven to madness by its whispers. He attempted to seize the ring from Frodo, believing that its power would allow him to save his city, Gondor, from the growing darkness. But in doing so, he only hastened the ring's corrupting influence, furthering the darkness that had already begun to seep into Middle-earth. Samwise Gamgee, Frodo's loyal friend, stood as the only bulwark against the ring's terrible pull. Sam, though small and seemingly insignificant, possessed an inner strength that allowed him to resist the ring's temptations. It was through his devotion to Frodo and his unshakable resolve that the ring did not claim both of them. Sam's loyalty, his courage, and his pure heart were in the end the very things that allowed him to help Frodo carry the ring to the fires of Mount Doom. The ring's influence reached even further. Gollum, the wretched creature who had once been its master, returned to play his part in the final drama. In a moment of desperation, Frodo fell under the ring's sway, claiming it as his own, just as he reached the fires of Mount Doom. But in that moment of triumph, Gollum, driven by his obsession, attacked Frodo and bit the ring from his finger, sealing the ring's fate. In his madness, Gollum fell into the fires with the ring, and with it, Sauron's power was finally and irrevocably broken. The destruction of the One Ring brought about the end of Sauron's dominion over Middle-earth. With the ring's destruction, the Dark Lord was cast into oblivion, and his dark armies crumbled. The shadow that had loomed over the world for so long was finally dispelled. But the consequences of the ring's existence would forever be felt. The scars it left upon Middle-earth, upon its peoples, and upon the hearts of those who had borne it would take many generations to heal. In the end, the One Ring stood as a testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition and the seduction of absolute power. It was a reminder that true strength lies not in domination, but in the courage to resist its temptations. As Gandalf wisely said, even the very wise cannot see all ends. The One Ring may have been destroyed, but its legacy would echo through the ages, teaching future generations the price of power and the importance of humility in the face of darkness.